Ma'alim fi al-Tariq, also Ma'alim fi al-Tariq, or Milestones, first published in 1964, is a short book by Egyptian Islamist author Sayyid Qutb in which he lays out a plan and makes a call to action to recreate the Muslim world on strictly Quranic grounds, casting off what Qutb calls Jahiliyyah. Ma'alim fi al-Tariq has been called one of the most influential works in Arabic of the last half-century. It is probably Qutb's most famous and influential work and one of the most influential Islamist tracts written. It has also become a manifesto for the ideology of Qutbism. Commentators have both praised Milestones as a groundbreaking, inspirational work by a hero and a martyr, and reviled it as a prime example of unreasoning entitlement, self-pity, paranoia, and hatred that has been a major influence on Islamist terrorism. English translations of the book are usually entitled simply Milestones. The book is also sometimes referred to as Signposts. The title Ma'alim fi al-Tariq translates into English as Milestones Along the Way, Signposts on the Road, or different combinations thereof. History. Ma'alim fi al-Tariq marked the culmination of Qutb's evolution from modernist author and critic to Islamist activist and writer, and finally to Islamist revolutionary and theoretician. It was written in prison, where Qutb spent 10 years under charges of political conspiracy against Egypt's Nasser regime, and first published in 1964. 4 of its 13 chapters were originally written for Qutb's voluminous Quranic commentary, Fazl al-Quran. Less than a year after its publication, Qutb was again arrested and brought to trial in Egypt under charges of conspiring against the state. Excerpts from the book were used to incriminate Qutb, and he was found guilty and executed by hanging in 1966. His death elevated his status to Shahid, martyr in the eyes of many Muslims. Milestones became a bestseller and widely distributed across the Arab-speaking world. To date, close to 2,000 editions of the work are said to have been published. Contents. In his book, Qutb seeks to set out milestones, or guiding markers along a road that will lead to the revival of Islam from its current extinction. Sharia. According to Qutb, the Muslim community has been extinct for a few centuries, and reverted to Jahiliyyah because those who call themselves Muslims have failed to follow the laws of God, or Sharia, traditional Islamic law. Following the Sharia is not just important but a defining attribute of Muslims, more necessarily than belief itself, because, according to the Sharia, to obey bullshit to worship. Quote, this means Muslims must not only refrain from worshipping anything other than God, they must not obey anything other than God. Anyone who serves someone other than God, be that someone a priest, president, a parliament, or a legal statute of a secular state, bullshit outside God's religion, although he may claim to profess this religion. Qutb sees Sharia as much more than a code of religious public laws. It is a complete way of life based on submission to God alone, crowding out anything non-Islamic. Its rules range from belief to administration and justice, to principles of art and science. Being God's law, Sharia is as accurate and true as any of the laws known as the laws of nature, such as gravity or electricity, and part of the universal law, which governs the entire universe. The modern Muslim world has erred by approaching the Quran for the sake of discussion, learning and information, or to solve some scientific legal problem. Quote, in fact, it should be approached as a source of instruction for obedience and action, to remove man from the servitude of other men unto the servitude of God. When of God's law is established on earth, it will lead to blessings falling on all mankind. Sharia is the only guarantee against any kind of discord in life. and will automatically bring peace and cooperation among individuals. Knowledge of the secrets of nature, its hidden forces and the treasures concealed in the expanses of the universe, will be revealed in an easy manner. The harmony between human life and the universe of Sharia law will approach the perfection of heaven itself. Just as Sharia is, in Qutb's view, all-encompassing and all-wonderful, whatever is non-Muslim is evil and corrupt, and its existence anywhere intolerable to true Muslims. In preaching and promoting Islam, for example, it is very important not to demean Islam by searching for resemblances between Islam and the filth and the rubbish heap of the West. According to Qutb, to ignore this fact and attempt to introduce elements of socialism and nationalism into Islam or the Muslim community is against Islam. Qutb stresses that in the early days of Islam, Muhammad did not make appeals to ethnic or class loyalty, though these crowd-pleasing appeals would have undoubtedly shortened the 13 years of hardship Muhammad had to endure while calling unresponsive Arabs to Islam. God did not lead his prophet on this course. This was not the way, and so must not be the way now. Islamic Vanguard, to restore Islam on earth and free Muslims from Jahili society, Jahili concepts, Jahili traditions and Jahili leadership. Qutb preaches that a vanguard be formed modeling itself after the original Muslims, the companions of Muhammad. Qutb believes these Muslims successfully vanquished Jahiliyyah principally in two ways. They cut themselves off from the Jahiliyyah, i.e., they ignored the learning and culture of non-Muslim groups, and separated themselves from their old non-Muslim friends and family. They looked to the Quran for orders to obey it, not as learning and information or solutions to problems. Following these principles, the vanguard will fight Jahiliyyah with a twofold approach: preaching and the movement. Preaching will persuade people to become true Muslims, while the movement will abolish the organizations and authorities of the Jahili system by physical power and jihad. Foremost amongst these organizations and people to be removed is the political power, which rests on a complex, interrelated ideological, racial, class, social and economic support, but ultimately includes the whole human environment. Force is necessary, Qutb explains, because it is naive to expect those who have usurped the authority of God to give up the power without a fight, remaining aloof from Jahiliyyah and its values and culture, but preaching and forcibly abolishing authority within it. The vanguard will travel the road, gradually growing from a silo of 3 individuals to 10, from 10 to 100, until there are thousands, and blossom into a truly Islamic community. The community may start in the homeland of Islam, but this is by no means the ultimate objective of the Islamic movement of jihad. Jihad must not merely be defensive, it must be offensive, and its objective must be to carry Islam throughout the earth to the whole of mankind. True Muslims should maintain a sense of supremacy and superiority on the road of renewal, but it is important that they also prepare themselves for a life until death in poverty, difficulty, frustration, torment and sacrifice, and even to brace themselves for possibility of death by torture at the hands of Jahiliyyah, sadistic, arrogant, mischievous, criminal and degraded people. Qutb ends his book by an example of persecution against Muslims from the Quran's Surat al-Buruj, enjoining modern-day Muslims to endure the same or worse tortures for the sake of carrying out God's will. After all, this world is not a place of reward. The believer's reward is in heaven. Influences: Islamic Two of Qutb's major influences were the medieval Islamic scholar Ibn Taymiyyah and contemporary Pakistani Islamist writer Sayyid Maududi. Both used the historical term Jahiliyyah to describe contemporary events in the Muslim world. Two other concepts popularized by Qutb in Milestones also came from Maududi: al-Ubudiyya, or worshipped, and al-Hakimiyya, or sovereignty. Qutb's precept that Sharia law is essential to Islam, and that any self-described Muslim ruler who ignores it in favor of man-made laws is actually a non-Muslim who should be fought and overthrown, came from a fatwa of Ibn Taymiyyah. According to Quran, whoever judged by any law other than the law of Allah is kafir. Non-Islamic Qutb's intense dislike of the West notwithstanding, some of his ideas have been compared to European fascism, the decline of contemporary Western civilization and infertility of democracy, inspiration from an earlier golden age and desire to restore its glory with an all-encompassing social, political, economic system, belief in massive foreign and Jewish conspiracies, and violent revolution to expel alien influences and to re-establish the power and international supremacy of the nation community. Although it differs from that ideology in being based on religion and not on race or ethnicity, fascism having made some impact among anti-British Arab Muslims before, during, and after World War II, the influence of particular fascist thinkers in Qutb's work is disputed, though these claims can be disproven. Qutb believed in the social justice and redistributive economics of Islam and wished to see this equality prevail once again, hence his adhering to the Islamic society. Also, his dislike of the Jews was not about race, as was the case with the Nazis, rather a feeling that they were indeed plotting from the minute of Islam's conception to destroy the Muslim Ummah. And finally, Qutb does state that neither democracy nor dictatorship work, as he believes in a society freed from the authority of man, whether it be through democratic or undemocratic processes. The centrality of an Islamic vanguard in Qutb's political program also suggests influence from Leninist thinking. Criticism. Qutb's book was originally a bestseller and became more popular as the Islamic revival strengthened. Islamists have hailed him as a matchless writer, one of the greatest thinkers of contemporary Islamic thought, and compared to Western political philosopher John Locke. Egyptian intellectual Tariq al-Bishri has compared the influence of Milestones to Vladimir Lenin's pamphlet What Is to Be Done, where the founder of modern communism outlined his theories of how communism would be different from socialism. Christians and Jews as polytheists. Qutb repeatedly proclaims that serving human lords is intolerable, and as a practice Islam has come to annihilate. Christians and Jews are guilty of it since, according to Qutb, they give priests and rabbis the authority to make laws, and it is clear that obedience to laws and judgments is a sort of worship. Because of this, Qutb says these religions are actually polytheist, not monotheist. Qutb says this from chapter number 9 and verse number 31 from the Quran. They took the rabbis and the monks to be the lords besides Allah and Messiah, son of Maryam, while they were commanded in the Torah and the Injil to worship none but one Allah. Praise and glory be to him. From having the partners they associate Western and Jewish conspiracies. Qutb asserted that world Jewry was and is engaged in conspiracies whose purpose is to eliminate all limitations, especially the limitations imposed by faith and religion, so that Jews may penetrate into body politics of the whole world and then may be free to perpetuate their evil designs. At the top of the list of these activities is usury, the aim of which is that all the wealth of mankind end up in the hands of Jewish financial institutions which which run on interest. He also alleged that the West had centuries-long enmity toward Islam, which led it to create a well-thought-out scheme to demolish the structure of Muslim society. At the same time, the Western world realizes that Western civilization is unable to present any healthy values for the guidance of mankind, and the American people blush with shame when confronted with the immoralities and vulgarity of their own country in comparison with the superiority of Islam's logic, beauty, humanity, and happiness. Olivier Roy has described Qutb's attitude as one of radical contempt and hatred for the West, and complains that the propensity of Muslims like Qutb to blame problems on outside conspiracies is currently paralyzing Muslim political thought. For to say that every failure is the devil's work is the same as asking God, or the devil himself, to solve one's problems. Milestones in Islam. Other questions involve Qutb's ideas of Sharia and freedom. Sharia. Qutb's ideology is premised upon Sharia law and its application to every aspect of life. It does not explain or illustrate how any specific statutes are better or different from man-made law. Evidence to support assertions in Ma'alim 5. Al-Tariq is limited to scriptural quotations, but as assured as Sharia is, without doubt, perfect in the highest degree, and will free humanity from servitude to other men. Some, such as scholar Khalid Abu al-Fadl, have questioned Qutb's understanding of Sharia, and his assumptions that Sharia is not only perfect but accessible to mortals in its completeness. Qutb's assertion that the Quran should be approached as a source of instruction for obedience and action following the fundamentalist prescription that the Quran is our law. Quote, freedom. Qutb explains that Sharia law needs no human authorities for citizens to obey and thus frees humanity from servitude, because God's law has no vagueness or looseness, which would necessitate judges to settle disputes over interpretation, and no need for enforcement authorities because, as soon as a command is given, the heads are bowed, and nothing more is required for implementation except to hear it. Quote, this uniquely free socio-economic system not only frees Muslims to be true Muslims, but explains why offensive jihad to establish the sovereignty of God, i.e., true Islam, throughout the world would not constitute aggression towards non-Muslims but rather a movement to wipe out tyranny and to introduce true freedom to mankind. Since even the most contented and patriotic non-Muslim living in a non-Muslim state is still obeying a human authority, these non-Muslims must be freed by Islamic jihad, just as the non-Muslims of Persia or Byzantium were freed by invading Muslim armies in the 7th century AD. Qutb's political philosophy has been described as an attempt to instantiate a complex and multi-layer eschatological vision, partly grounded in the counter-hegemonic re-articulation of the traditional ideal of academic jargon.